Lauder. Morality is not fairness and tolerance. The modern world did not create a better morality. In some instances, they created a fairer world, a more just world, but not a more moral world. Today, most children in this country are born out of wedlock. Is that more moral, Mr. Lauder? Today, there is less respect for the law than 50 years ago, 80 years ago. Is that more moral? Today, a woman can come and demand an abortion on a fetus that could live if it were taken out of her. And according to the Torah, it borders on murder. Is that more moral? Millions of babies have been killed since Roe v. Wade in the name of privacy. Is that more moral? Sexual relations are seen as just merely natural consequences of ordinary dating. And as a result of that, marriage has been put off years in the future. Is that more moral? Is the celebration of deviant behavior more moral? Well, you say that's the tolerance for the LGBT community. I have to ask you, are you aware that when it was suggested that homosexuality was a genetic matter, not an illness, that the majority of scientists dealing with this topic quit their association? I think something like 70% quit their association with those therapists or those scientists dealing with the issue of homosexuality. The majority of scientists believed it to be a deviation of natural function, which it is. I asked you a question. Is that morality, or is that just merely pandering to people's desires? We have open promiscuity, and then we have the Me Too movement. Women project themselves as sensual objects and then find defense that men are attracted and the wrong kind of men take advantage. Is that morality? The answer is no, it's not more moral. The world is not a more moral place. The tolerance for Muslim extremists, calling those who oppose Muslim extremism as Islamophobes, is that more moral? Is the call for confiscating other people's properties more moral? The violence that the so-called Antifa movement has, that is uncalled for. There's no necessity for it. It's supposed to be, a peaceful demonstration. Instead, is violent and intimidating. Is that more moral? Is the demand for agreeing with climate change, even though there is not a shred of actual physical evidence that it has happened to the degree that they claim it is, and that it is man-made, is that more moral? You say, well, 97% of scientists agree. 97% of scientists don't agree. They put the numbers up as a ruse. And the reason why so many scientists sign on to it is because that's where the money is. True scientists have been skeptical of it. True climatologists have been skeptical of the climate change movement. There hasn't been a massive change in temperature of the country, of the world, in almost 17 or 18 years. That's not morality. That's politicization of economics. Point being that when the United Nations, 90% or 70% of their resolutions are anti-Israel, that's not morality. When you have BDS movements being supported by Democrats, like Senator Booker, who tried to be nice to the Jews in order to get elected, is that more moral? Or is that political expedience? Pandering to hateful people who want the destruction of Israel because it's another avenue for votes, is that more moral? Morality's got nothing to do with the development of the Western world. There is one element of the Western world that is better, in that we have an ability to create a society where we can tolerate each other. We tolerate each other's differences. But that's getting less and less. You see that from the fact that you can take a religious person to court because that person does not believe that homosexuality is something to be celebrated. That's his religious belief. And you can then put him out of business because he's not providing equal services to everybody. It's not true. That isn't true. It's just that you're trying to force the person to act differently than his conscience permits him. That's not morality. That's trying to force people to think things your way. Democrats believe in democracy only if you agree with them. That's not more moral. The country is based upon tolerance of different views. Not anymore, but it's based on that. It's based on tolerance, but only if you agree with them. If you don't agree with them, you'll be attacked by Wolf Schnitzer and Rachel Madcow and Mr. Kiss My Toes Matthews. This is what has happened to the United States of America over these years. President Bush promised Ariel Sharon that America would always have Israel's back and would not force Israel to give back the territories without a solid agreement of peace on behalf of the Arabs. Obama abrogated that agreement. Obama also tried to undermine the Jewish state. That's not tolerance, that's not morality, and that's just plain politics. The United States is a place where theoretically people should get along and can get along and have gotten along for the most part for 200 years, but has a lot of flaws. And those flaws, to a certain degree, have been addressed. But there are still people who want to find problems, find people who are oppressed and champion their issue at the expense of others. That's where the difference lies. That's not moral. Championing the craziness of the LGBT community and attacking the sensibilities of people who are religious is not more moral. It is pandering to a certain group at the expense of another. The United States theoretically has created tolerance, but is becoming more and more an intolerant society, especially if you give certain groups the power. They will then try to get rid of all religions. I mean that very straightforwardly. They want to get rid of all religions, except for Muslims, because the Muslims are downtrodden, supposedly, in this country. And they will support the destruction of Israel. That's what the United States is coming to. If you follow that agenda, which Ronnie seems to be promoting. The difference between the Western world and Israel is size. The United States is about 400 times the size of Israel. It only has about 40 times the population of Israel. So it means more people in less space, greater population density, especially since most of Israel, 2/3 of Israel, is desert. The United States has tremendous areas where people can find homes and live apart and live the way they want to. In Israel, it's very, very hard to do that. Because it's so hard to do that, and because, for the most part, 80% of pre-67 Israel are Jews. And even if you include the Arabs of the West Bank, notwithstanding their false claims, 65% of the people living there are Jews. Jews are divided into two things. They're not 50 different groups. It's religious and non-religious. Non-religious Jews don't want restrictions on the Sabbath, nor do they want restrictions on places of eating. Religious Jews want that no one should drive their streets on the Sabbath and upset their sensibilities about the Sabbath. There isn't that much place, and they live in proximity with each other. It's not that we live among the Italians and the Irish and the African Americans and the Latinos. And therefore, what one Jew does can't affect the other, because you could just write it off that it's a different person who's riding his car on Shabbat. But when most of the people in your neighborhood are Jewish, this offends your sensibilities. That's the fact. And therefore, this is not a question of being able to get along. There's just not enough space and too much closeness to be able to deal with just, let's get along, can't we all get along and do what we want? The answer is there's not enough space, and we'll conflict with each other. And so we have to try to do things the best we can. Israel's policies reflect that reality. We are unlike America, and you can't judge Israel by America's standards. Ronnie, you're a great guy, but the article is incorrect.